Night after night, in the lavish mansion, the ungrateful son raised his hand against the very mother who had once nurtured him with sweat and tears. His heartless wife joined in without a shred of mercy, treating the old woman as nothing more than a burden to be cast aside in order to preserve their glory and wealth. They believed that power and money could conceal their cruelty, that the cries of an aged mother would never pierce through those cold, unfeeling walls. But they forgot one truth. A mother's love can endure, yet it can also rise in fury and deliver punishment. She quietly carried her wounds in silence, enduring humiliation that seemed endless, until one rainy night, she left in silence, only to return with a decision so powerful it forced both of them, the unfilial son and the ungrateful wife, to kneel in tears before her, under the eyes of the whole world. This story is not only the tragedy of a single family, but also a warning to us all. Whoever forgets the debt owed to their parents will one day face the price of betrayal. The ending you are about to witness will chill anyone who dares to be unfilial, for the punishment will not come through violence, but through justice and the relentless torment of their own conscience. Stay with this story until the very end to see with your own eyes what becomes of those who dare to scorn the sacred bond of mother and child, and to understand that no wealth, no fame, can ever hide the sin of ingratitude. The price to be paid will leave you breathless until the final moment. Before dawn in Lagos, the sky was always a deep indigo, like an old Jeel scarf hanging from a rotting wooden wall. In a tiny rented room in Ajagunle, Madame Adama Okike rose to the sound of roosters and the screech of fish trucks outside. Her back ached as if she had carried the sun itself through a long night. On the frayed mat, Obinna, her 8-year-old son, lay curled under a thin blanket, his frail hands still clutching a worn mathematics book. She bent down, stroked his hair, and whispered a prayer into her heart. Lord, let my child learn. Let him learn so he may escape this damp room. Learn so he can hold his head high in the world. Breakfast was nothing more than a bowl of gari soaked in water with a pinch of sugar. She hid her hunger as if hiding her shame, pushing the bowl toward her son. Obinna looked up, eyes dark and uneasy. Mama, you eat. Then we'll go early to Yaba market before it gets crowded. You eat, son. I still have yesterday's bread. She smiled a smile like a dry leaf, thin and trembling, then turned away, lifting the heavy plastic container she used to fetch water for hire. Her blouse was already soaked in sweat, though the sun was barely a thin line above the corrugated roofs. Adama's day stretched as if it were 3 days in one. At dawn, she carried water. At noon, she waited tables at a canteen. In the afternoon, she hawked ground nuts and fruit. And by night, she scrubbed floors in a mansion at Surulere. Her hands were cracked like dry seasoned soil, her knees bruised like rusted scars. Each time she paid the rent, the landlady looked her over from head to toe, voice sticky with disdain. One more late day, and I'll lock your door. Adama bowed her head, fingers twisting the edge of her wrapper. Please, just a few more days. My boy's school fees are due this week. The landlady rolled her eyes and left, her cheap perfume mixing with the damp smell of the hallway. Adama exhaled. Pride had become a luxury she could no longer afford. She would trade it gladly for one stamped receipt of school fees. In the afternoon, Obinna dashed home from school, sweat rolling down his temples. He handed her a test paper marked with a 9 out of 10. She received it as if it were a train ticket, her gaze already traveling somewhere far. You did well, my son. One day you'll go to the University of Lagos, you hear? Do you think I can make it? Not think, you will. I have already seen you standing in a tall glass building, lights shining all night because people believe in you. At night, Lagos changed its scent. Coal smoke, engine oil, sweat, and the taste of hope drifted through the hot wind. Beneath a flickering street lamp, Adama spread her mat of roasted groundnuts. Drunk men staggered past. One stopped, tossed a coin. "Old woman, make it a big bag." She nodded, hands moving swiftly. The basket on her back grew lighter, but inside her, the dream grew heavier. Before packing up, she tucked away a handful of peanuts for Obinna, a small reward for pages soaked with sweat. Sometimes rain struck without warning. Lagos rain fell like the sky's fury, sweeping away trash and sorrow alike. Stalls collapsed, goods drenched. She clutched her basket, shivering inside a torn raincoat. By the time she reached home, water had flooded half the mat. Obinna hurried to raise his books on bricks, drying pages one by one. He glanced at her hands, red cracks lining every knuckle. "Mama, does it hurt?" "Pain becomes familiar, son. Some pain keeps you awake. The only pain I fear is the kind that makes you forget who you are." She smiled then, eyes deep as if they hid an ocean of storms. The next morning, she worked as a housemaid in a white mansion draped with purple bougainvillea. The kitchen gleamed, the fridge brimmed with food, the marble floor chilled her feet. She bent low, wiping imaginary stains, every stroke of the rag like a whispered prayer. The elegant mistress handed her a box of leftovers, telling her to take it home for her boy. On the way back, Adama stopped at the market, trading for flour and oil, and fried puff-puff until the air was sweet. Obinna ate with shining eyes. "Today I want to study more math." "Yes. After I finish sewing these clothes tonight, we'll study together." They sat across the low table, yellow light timidly falling on pages filled with numbers. A drop of her sweat smudged an equal sign. She quickly wiped it, laughing like a mischievous child. Obinna laughed too, and the sound opened a window in that cramped room. Then came exam season. Obinna was chosen to sit for a scholarship test. The application fee, small to others, stood before them like a tall wall. Adama silently removed her cheap wedding earrings, the last possession left from her late husband. She pawned them, the money bitterly little. That night she opened a wooden box, inside a mildewed wedding photo from a poor studio. Her husband's gentle smile stared back. She touched his face, whispering, "My love, let me borrow you one more time." So our son can fly. Tears stained the photo's frayed edge. On exam day, the sun blazed like a furnace. She led her son to the school gate, both lost in a sea of families. Adama wore a torn hat, fanning herself with a palm leaf fan, lips moving in endless prayers. Before entering, Obinna turned back. She placed her calloused palm over his chest. "Breathe deep. You are not alone. On your shoulders is your mother's sweat. Beneath your feet is the soil of your ancestors. Go." The exam hall door shut like a knife through air. She leaned against the wall, every tick of the clock stretching into a year. When he emerged, face blurred by the harsh sun, he only nodded. She understood. Faith has a scent, the scent of fresh paper, worn pencils, and sunlight scattered like salt across hair. That evening, Lagos lit up. Adama arranged her stall again, adding extra small bags of peanuts. She needed just a little more, enough to cover another fee. Wind drifted from the swamps, carrying high-life music from a nearby bar. She swayed gently, spine aching but heart unburdened. The future does not come by itself. It must be summoned bag by bag, bucket by bucket, footstep by footstep across cold marble floors and rain-soaked nights. When the results arrived, Obinna Okiki's name shone on the scholarship letter like thunder at noon. Her hands trembled, opening the envelope, her heart pounding. Mother and son embraced in their cramped room, their shout bursting like Sunday church bells. Neighbors came to pat her back. Even the landlady softened her tone. That night she bought a little beef in extravagance and cooked pepper soup. The chili made her cough and laugh at once, each cough a burst of joy, knowing they had climbed one more rung. Adama sat by the doorway, watching her son sleep, a smile still on his lips. She quietly mended the frayed edge of his uniform, each stitch a reminder of her journey. From a village girl in Enugu to a widow toiling through Lagos, from soft hands long ago to cracked skin mapped like a storm-beaten earth. Every crack led to the same place, her heart. There, a mother's love had never broken. Outside, the city refused to sleep. Inside, the mother refused to sleep as well. She listened to her son's breathing, like waves lapping against a dark shore. Tomorrow the grinding wheel would turn again. But in this warm silence, she understood that every hardship had taken shape. The shape of a boy who would rise beyond Lagos's indigo dawn and step into the flood of light. And when asked where her strength came from, she would point to her hands that carried water, scrubbed floors, sold peanuts, mended clothes, and held her child, and she would smile. From a love that knows how to labor, and a labor that knows how to love. The rainy season passed, the dry season returned, and the years rushed by like Danfo buses speeding across the third mainland bridge. Obinna grew taller, stronger, his shoulders broadening with promise. Each time he returned from the University of Lagos, he carried home a stack of thick books and a smile as bright as morning. Madame Adama stood at the doorway of their room in Ajagunle, wiping her hands on her old wrapper, eyes glistening as she watched her son walk in. His worn shoes were caked with dust, yet his stride was full of pride. "Mama, I ranked first this term. They even awarded me a scholarship." Her hands trembled as she received the papers, as though she were holding a treasure. She pulled him into her arms, tears soaking into the sweat-dampened cloth of his shirt. In that moment, every drop of sweat, every sleepless night, every humiliation endured over the years dissolved into nothingness. Lagos at night was still as noisy as a never-ending festival. But in their small room in Ajagunle, the laughter of mother and son drowned out the roar of engines, the beat of high-life music, even the rhythm of empty stomachs. Quietly, Adama stitched the seams of his frayed white shirt, her heart whispering its own calculation. Just a few more years, and my son will be standing on another stage. Her faith became his wings. Obinna received a scholarship to study business administration in London. On the day she sent him off at Murtala Muhammad Airport, she wrapped a faded wool scarf around his shoulders and spoke into the hot wind. "It's cold out there. Don't forget the warmth of Lagos's sun. Don't forget the beat of the Yoruba drums. Don't forget your mother's voice." Obinna held her tightly, his broad hands now covering her shoulders completely. She watched as he passed through security, his figure fading into the pale blue light. That night, the rented room felt strangely vast, and silence flowed through her like a deep river. Yet she smiled. Longing is sweet when it is bound to hope. In London, Obinna wrote letters home about the wide lecture halls, the bright libraries, and friends of every color. Adama read each line with weary eyes, the words blurring through her tears, but her heart swelled. She kept every letter in a wooden box, alongside her old wedding photo and the wedding ring that had long lost its stone. That was her treasure, the past, the present, and the future. Years later, Obinna returned to Nigeria, but this time, he did not step down from a dusty bus. He arrived in a sleek car, standing tall before the glass tower on Victoria Island, the headquarters of Okiki Logistics. Newspapers blared the headline, "Young entrepreneur Obinna Okike, the new star of Nigeria's logistics industry." Adama sat among the guests, wearing a blue jeal, her calloused hands folded neatly in her lap. When her son's name echoed across the hall, she shot to her feet, tears spilling freely. Obinna walked onto the stage, the lights blazing on his confident, radiant face. In that moment, she whispered, "Yes, my son, this is what I saw in you back in those days when you ate meals watered with tears." When Obinna stepped down, He bent and embraced his mother before a sea of cameras. Applause thundered like waves. Yet within that embrace, Adama heard only his heartbeat, the same heartbeat of the little boy who once studied under the glow of a kerosene lamp. From then on, Obinna's life transformed. He appeared in newspapers, was invited to give speeches, attended meetings in Abuja, and signed international contracts. Adama now lived in the new house he had bought for her in Lekki spacious, luxurious, yet she still kept her old habits, going to the market, cooking pepper soup and jollof rice for him. Some nights, when Obinna came home late, his suit smelling faintly of cigar smoke, she still waited in the living room, murmuring as always, "Eat first, son. Eat, and then go talk business with the world." She saw the change clearly. Her boy was no longer the eager child clutching test papers. He had become a man of stature, a big man. But deep down, she believed he had not forgotten the sweat, the ground nuts she once sold by the roadside, every sacrifice that had shaped him. At night, when Lagos glowed with a sea of lights, Adama stood silently by the high-rise window, looking down on the city. Each light reminded her of a memory. The water bucket on her shoulders, the landlord's harsh words, the coins clinking on her peanut mat. All of it had turned into light, gathered into the form of one man, Obinna. And she, though her body weary and her heart cracked with time, still stood tall, proud. That day on Victoria Island, the sky was crystal clear, the sunlight spreading out like a golden carpet, reflecting off the glass of towering skyscrapers. The sea murmured against the distant shore, its waves mingling with the trumpet notes of an Afrobeat band. The wedding of Obinna Okiki, the celebrated young entrepreneur, had been the talk of Lagos for weeks. Newspapers splashed the photos, television broadcasted live, and the guest list glittered with ministers, magnates of logistics and banking, even Nollywood stars. At the center of the stage, draped in ivory carpets, roses flown in from South Africa formed a dazzling archway. Crystal chandeliers shimmered from the five-star hotel's ceiling. The fragrance of perfume, the aroma of fine wine, and even the scent of jollof rice drifting in from the kitchen blended together into a symphony of luxury. Madame Adama sat in the seat of honor, adorned in a golden aso oka, her head wrapped in a brilliant blue jail, her eyes brimming with tears. Her hands trembled, partly from emotion, partly from the toil of the past days. She herself had gone to Balogan Market to select the fabrics, hired the women artisans to sew them, and supervised the decorators down to the smallest detail. Even the ivory tablecloth she had chosen to harmonize with the pure white of the bride's gown. The bride Vanessa Nwosu appeared in a lace dress imported from Paris, her face radiant. As the trumpet sounded, every gaze turned toward her. Obinna stood tall in a deep blue suit, his eyes confident, his smile gleaming. Together they held hands and walked down the aisle, between rows of cheering guests. Roses rained down like sweet showers. Adama rose to her feet, clapping with shining eyes. In a flash, she saw herself on her own wedding day, dressed simply, standing beside her late husband, Obinna's father, in a poor studio photograph. Years of hardship surged back, pressing on her chest, then dissolved into that moment of happiness. She thought, every struggle was worth it, just to see my son this happy. Vows beneath the lights. When the minister asked, Obinna, do you agree to love, cherish, and protect this woman until death parts you? Obinna smiled, his eyes glistening. I do. Applause erupted. Adama pressed her handkerchief to her eyes, her lips quivering as she whispered, May God bear witness to my son's promise. Then came Vanessa's turn. Her voice rang clear, but her gaze carried a faint touch of pride. I do. Adama noticed it, just for an instant, but she brushed it aside, telling herself it was only the reflection of the chandelier's light. The wedding feast stretched deep into the night. Yoruba drums thundered joyfully as guests danced beneath neon lights. Trays of sizzling suya, steaming plates of jollof rice, and fragrant egusi soup were carried out endlessly. Wine glasses shimmered. Laughter rippled across the grand hall. Obinna and Vanessa cut into the towering six-tiered cake, topped with 2 white doves. When the first slice was offered to his mother, Obinna's smile blazed. "Mama, everything today is because of you." Adama received it, her hands trembling as if she could not believe she was there, living inside a sweet dream. Tears rolled down her cheeks, mixing with the sugary taste of the cake, salty, yet sweeter than anything she had ever known. But amidst the splendor, she sometimes caught Vanessa's gaze upon her, cold, detached, as if looking at something unnecessary. Adama brushed it aside, telling herself that every bride was exhausted on her wedding day, and that affection would bloom with time. Late into the night, after most of the guests had gone, Adama remained, quietly straightening tablecloths and gathering fallen petals. She whispered to herself, "From today, this home has another daughter. I will love her as my own." In her heart, a flame of faith burned brightly. She believed every sacrifice, every hardship, had finally ended. Ahead lay only peace, a household filled with laughter. Yet somewhere deep inside, a draft of cold air seemed to blow through, extinguishing a fragile candle. A guest approached her and murmured, "You are truly blessed. To have such a successful son, what more could one ask for in life?" Adama nodded, her tear-filled eyes shining like stars. "Yes, I ask for nothing more in this life." Yet amidst all the splendor, Adama sometimes caught Vanessa's gaze upon her, a gaze cold and indifferent, as if regarding something unnecessary. She brushed it aside, telling herself that every bride grew weary on her wedding day, and that love would surely blossom with time. Late into the night, when most of the guests had left, she remained alone, folding tablecloths and gathering scattered petals. She whispered to herself, "From now on, this home has gained another daughter. I will love her as if she were my own." In her heart, a bright flame of faith flickered. She believed that every sacrifice, every hardship, had finally come to an end. Ahead lay only peace, a home filled with laughter. But somewhere deep within, it felt as though a cold draft had slipped through, snuffing out a small, fragile candle. Time passed like the Harmattan wind sweeping across Lagos, swift, dry, and leaving cracks in people's hearts that never fully healed. Obinna Okeke's mansion in Lekki grew ever more magnificent. Walls freshly painted, luxury cars lined up in the garage, servants bustling in and out. Yet amidst the splendor, Madame Adama, the mother, who had once raised her son with nothing but peanuts and sweat, began to feel out of place. Old age crept in slowly but surely. At first, it was small things, putting down a spoon and forgetting where, or mixing up her grandchild's name. One day she brewed tea but forgot the leaves, serving only boiling water. Obinna frowned. "Mama, you have to be more careful. People will think you're losing your mind." She only smiled, her clouded eyes tinged with sorrow. "Yes, I'm old now. My mind may forget, but my heart still remembers you, drop by drop." That month, she forgot to turn off the gas, and smoke filled the gleaming kitchen. Vanessa, the daughter-in-law, who had little patience to begin with, screamed, her voice sharp as a blade. "Are you trying to burn this whole mansion down? We worked hard for all of this, and you nearly destroyed it in a second." Obinna said nothing, but his gaze was cold. Adama stood trembling in the corner, fingers clutching the edge of her wrapper, her face like a child caught doing wrong. The shame tore her heart apart, yet she bit her lip and stayed silent. From that day on, Vanessa banned her from the kitchen. Whenever she saw her mother-in-law sitting absent-mindedly, she spat out cruel remarks. "Old people like you belong in a nursing home. Staying here only brings trouble. Obina, instead of defending his mother, only sighed, sipping his wine, as though his wife's words were undeniable truth. The tragedy did not stop at insults. Some nights, while the insects still hummed in the garden, the mansion echoed with shouts, slamming, and muffled sobs. Vanessa would grab her frail arm and shove her onto the marble floor. "You senile old woman. Do you know how embarrassed I was today? You forgot a client's name right in front of them." Obinna, standing nearby, his face flushed with anger, shouted too, "You've humiliated me, Mama. I spent years building this company, and now people laugh behind my back because of my forgetful mother." Adama fell, her head striking the table's edge. Blood trickled down, but she only covered it with her hand, tears glistening. Her voice trembled. "Son, you are my flesh and blood. I never meant for this to happen." But the only reply was a cold glare, sometimes even a furious kick, night after night. She curled up in the room at the end of the corridor, listening to the couple argue about the company, about profits, and then hearing herself turned into the excuse for their rage. She wept silently into her pillow, asking, "Is this the reward for a lifetime of sacrifice?" By day, when visitors came, they still called her Mama Okeki, still invited her to sit in the seat of honor. But Vanessa had already whispered, "Sit still. Don't speak nonsense and embarrass us." Her heart twisted at those words, but she nodded anyway. Amid the polished laughter of high society, she sat quietly, like an antique decoration seen, but never truly noticed. Once her grandchild ran up, hugging her legs and crying, "Grandma!" Vanessa quickly pulled the child away, snapping, "Don't cling to her. She isn't clean." Adama's heart shattered. From the innocence in the child's eyes, she felt herself being erased from the world. One rainy night, thunder shaking the roof, Obina and Vanessa lashed out again this time for her forgetting to lock the back door. They shoved her down, her frail body trembling. A lightning flash lit her face, wrinkled, bruised, yet her eyes burned bright. For the first time in years, she did not cry. She lifted her gaze and whispered, "You may beat me, but I still have this left, the power to choose." That night, while the house slept, she quietly packed a few clothes into a cloth bag, tied her scarf around her head, and stepped out through the heavy iron gates. Rain drenched her wrapper, but she walked on without looking back. Lagos lay shrouded in darkness, yet within her a fire blazed, the fire of decision. That night, Lagos rain fell like egungun drums pounding furiously on corrugated iron roofs. In the back room of the Lekki mansion, Madame Adama sat in silence, her eyes swollen, her trembling hand resting on a fresh bruise along her arm. The voices of Obina and Vanessa drifted in from the living room, each word piercing her heart like a blade. "She's nothing but a burden. We have to find a way to throw her out of this house." Vanessa's voice hissed, and Obina's silence was crueler than any lash of a whip. In that moment, as the storm raged outside, a spark of clarity flared in her mind. She understood. If she remained, she would be crushed, forgotten, turned to dust. Yet she still had one thing left, her final choice. Her eyes shone in the darkness, lit by the flame of defiance newly kindled in her aging heart. When the house had sunk into sleep, she quietly gathered a few clothes into her old cloth bag. Thunder roared as though to stop her, but she walked the long corridor. The heavy iron gate swung open. Rain lashed her face, cold and cutting. She pulled her jeel tighter around her head and stepped into the darkened street. Each step was a wound upon her heart, yet also a stroke severing the invisible chains that had bound her for years. Lagos in the night was shrouded in rain, streetlights casting a weak amber glow. The floodwater swept trash along the gutters, carrying away her years of humiliation. By morning, when the rain subsided, she found herself standing at the glass doors of a law office on Victoria Island. Her clothes were soaked, her slippers caked with mud. The receptionist looked up, startled, ready to dismiss her, but froze at the unwavering resolve in her eyes. Inside the meeting room, a young lawyer listened intently, his gaze heavy with sympathy as she recounted her story. Her sinewed hands lay on the polished table, her voice trembling but firm. I want to transfer all assets, the company, the house, to the Enugu Orphan Foundation. My son is no longer the boy I once raised. If these assets remain with him, he will only use them to destroy and to enrich ingratitude. The lawyer paused, stunned, then nodded solemnly. Papers were placed before her. One by one, her shaky yet resolute signatures appeared, a historic act in ink. Each stroke was a blade, cutting the cord that had tied her to an ungrateful son. While waiting for the seal, she gazed out of the window. Lagos pulsed with its usual chaos, gridlocked traffic on Third Mainland Bridge, horns blaring, crowds rushing. She closed her eyes, memories flooding like a river in spate. The young woman carrying water at Yaba Market, sweat-soaked yet eyes alight. The little boy, Obinna, studying by kerosene lamp, murmuring numbers. The meager meal of watery gari, her pushing the best morsel toward him. The day he won the scholarship, her tears of joy falling without end. Each memory was sharp, searing. She whispered, "My son, I gave you everything. But when I needed only a hand to hold, you gave me blows instead. So let this final gift be for children who will know gratitude." At last, the will was sealed in a white envelope, stamped with red wax. The lawyer handed it to her with a grave voice. "Madam, you have formally revoked your son's inheritance. From now on, all assets belong to the foundation." She clutched the envelope to her chest, her eyes blurred with tears, yet her lips curved into a smile no longer trembling, but radiant with pride. In her heart, words rang like an oath. "Son, from this day, I am no longer a victim. I am the master of my own destiny." Outside, the skies cleared after the storm, sunlight breaking through clouds, falling across her aged but luminous face. In that light, Madame Adama was no longer just an old, frail mother. She was a warrior, a Nigerian woman who had dared to overturn fate with her trembling but unyielding hands. That morning in Lagos was heavy, as if a gray veil of smoke draped over the city. Along the road to the Lagos High Court, sleek SUVs lined up bumper to bumper. Reporters swarmed, camera flashes exploded. News of the inheritance trial of businessman Obinna Okiki had spread across Nigeria. People whispered that a vast fortune, one of the country's leading logistics companies, real estate holdings stretching from Victoria Island to Abuja, was about to change hands. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was taut as a drawn bow. Polished wooden benches, sunlight slashing through tall windows, carving long blades of light across the marble floor. Obinna sat at the defendant's table, his tailored black suit immaculate but his face unsettled. Beside him, Vanessa sat with heavy makeup, lips painted crimson, her eyes darting nervously as if terrified someone might see through her. Opposite them, Madame Adama entered, frail, wrapped in a simple pale blue gel, her hands trembling with age, yet her posture carried pride. The courtroom fell silent. No one could believe that this fragile old woman stood at the center of a multi-million-dollar storm. The lawyer for the Orphan Foundation rose, his voice sharp. "Your Honor, Madame Adama Okiki has formally transferred all assets and company control to the Enugu Orphan Foundation. This decision has been notarized, legalized, and cannot be revoked." A buzz erupted through the gallery. Obinna leapt to his feet. "No! That wealth is my work. I built this company with my own sweat." The lawyer replied coolly, "Your work? Or the sweat and tears of the woman who raised you selling peanuts in Yaba Market to pay your school fees?" Obinna froze. All eyes turned to Madame Adama. She slowly rose, her voice trembling, but each word falling heavy as stone. "Obinna, my son, I raised you on thin milk, on meals watered with tears. I carried water, scrubbed floors, slept in markets so you could stay in school. You once promised you would make me proud, and I was proud until I grew old, until my memory faltered. Then you and your wife beat me, cast me out of my own home. The room gasped. The judge's gavel struck, but it could not silence the wave of murmurs and outrage. Vanessa's face turned pale. Sweat dripped down Obina's temple. Adama's voice cracked, yet her eyes blazed. I take nothing from you, but I will not allow you to trample the labor of my life. All of it now belongs to the orphans, so they will never endure the suffering you once endured. The judge's voice thundered like a storm. The court hereby rules, all assets and the company shall belong to the Enugu Orphan Foundation, in accordance with the legal will and documents of Madam Adama Okiki. The words slashed through the air like a blade. Vanessa shrieked, her cry shrill. No! This cannot be! Obina collapsed forward, his head in his hands. As Adama descended from the witness stand, Obina suddenly bolted forward, fell to his knees before her, tears streaming. Mama! Forgive me. I've lost my way. Vanessa, too, dropped to her knees, sobbing, though her eyes betrayed more regret for the fortune than true repentance. Adama looked down at them, her face carved with a lifetime of hardship. Her eyes moist but resolute. She raised her hand, not to touch, but to stop them. Forgiveness belongs to God. As for me, I leave your judgment to your own conscience night after night. She turned away. The heavy wooden doors closed behind her, sunlight spilling in, wrapping her thin frame in a halo. On the courthouse steps, dozens of orphans rushed to her, their faces dirty but their eyes bright. Mama! Mama! They cried, their voices rising above car horns, above the wails inside the courtroom. She embraced them, tears clouding her vision, but her smile was serene. And so, on those high steps, the world saw a stark image. Inside, ungrateful children knelt in tears. Outside, a mother, frail yet radiant, lifted high by the arms of children who loved her like a queen.